All right, we're back. Wednesday night, man. Week's going by fast. I don't know if that's just me or if it's the same for you guys, but feels like things are moving along, which is good, especially in crypto land. And we'll talk about a few things that have just transpired here recently in the last couple of days, and even since Monday, that are some big deals that'll actually streamline the way that people can invest in crypto and the way that you could get your assets. We provide institutional custody. There'll be a couple other ways that you can do that if you have smaller bags. So we'll get into all of that and more. Run it down here in the chat tonight. If you guys do, put a super chat over here. We've got a couple of them that I missed that my wife was nice enough to print out for me that I will follow up on. So, if you pay, I want to make sure you get your questions answered. I feel bad. A lot of the time I pontificate and run, rampant on things and squirrel and take a little bit longer on a lot of these questions. And so I don't always make it to the end, and not everybody gets answered. So we want to make sure that that happens. So if you don't get answered, please reach out, send us a screenshot of that, and I will make sure I answer it on the next live. Or if you're in the mastermind, you can always just DM me. Hey, I got the hat on over here on TikTok. Yeah, if you're in the mastermind, and on that, tomorrow will be the last day that we ever allow the free code to get into the mastermind. It'll be the last time. So no longer going to be free. It is going to cost some money in order to participate in the mastermind moving forward. We've always had social at $25, so it'll be around that. But if you do want to get in there, you want to try it out, see if it's for you or not. Like, no skin off your nose or back. Ours either, month to month, no contract. Get in there, see if you like it or not. You can absolutely do that if you use the code Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO. It'll run across the top of the screen here over there on YouTube and on X if you want to go check it out. So tomorrow's the last day. Cutting it off. No more free entrance into the mastermind. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and hop into some of the cool things that are happening for ETFs. Got a lot of people joining us over here on YouTube, X, and on TikTok. Appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening to hang out with me and listen to me ramble on about all the things that I think are cool and answer a lot of good questions that you guys have. So the ETFs, there's a standardized way that's been submitted for people to submit ETFs where the SEC would no longer have to approve them for digital assets or cryptos. And as long as you meet those guidelines, you're good to go. It immediately gets approved. So we'll see if these standards are accepted, if the SEC approves this or not. But some of the other notable components on this, and the one that was the most standout for me, was in-kind contributions and in-kind redemptions of your digital assets in and out of these ETFs. Right now, you can invest in kind into an ETF, but you can't pull it back out. You're only going to get cash. So for a lot of people that own digital assets, cool, you don't have to worry about self-custody anymore. It's held in institutional custody. You still get the upside, but if you sell, you're stuck with cash, right? There's no way to redeem the assets that you put in after they've appreciated. With this new standardization, you would be able to do that. And so I think you're going to see a lot of traditional crypto investors start to move their assets into ETFs, especially if they're held in institutional custody, right? So again, we provide that for our clients, segregated, bankruptcy remote, insured accounts. So you're still going to be commingling your assets with other people. I don't know how they're going to keep that from being a tax consequence going in to the fund or the ETF because you would be a limited partner. I guess you're exchanging it for shares in the ETF, so it's an equal value exchange. And there wouldn't be, just like you put in cash, there wouldn't be any capital gains tax there. But if you've had assets that have appreciated and you are now pooling those assets, and again, this is why when we set up an LLC, we always do a single member or we make sure you're going to do a qualified joint venture with your spouse in certain states, or you set up a family limited partnership, all of which don't have the tax consequences when you add your assets in there. But if you do a partnership with somebody else that's not family and you don't have a qualified joint venture or meet that exemption, whatever appreciation you had on the assets, the cost basis up to where it is now, you're going to have to realize those capital gains in exchange for the shares in that company. So again, we want to flesh out the tax law on this. We want to make sure it's kosher. And same thing on the way back out. You know, if you're redeeming the same amount that you put in, but then what's the point, right? Like, you want the upside. So any additional gain on the assets at that point should be taxable. We'll take the assets in kind. So if you want to move your IRA that's holding digital assets over to Digital Wealth Partners in the near future, they're going to have a way to compound those assets. There's going to be a trading algorithm that we can place on top of that account and be able to generate additional returns inside your IRA, which nobody else has. This is a proprietary method that we are rolling out, looking at the end of this quarter for that here in 2025. So if that sounds cool to you, it takes a while to move your IRA. The people that have it do not want to give it up. They do not want you to move your assets. They come up with some weird stuff like you need to fax us a signed document, you know, with your firstborn child's blood on it. It seems that way, but they really have asked us to fax documents. And I'm like, okay, you're a crypto IRA company and you're asking me to fax you documents in order to move clients' assets. Like, it's obvious that you're putting friction in place for this. And you are a progressive company and you're choosing to choose fax over email or DocuSign or anything else. So anyway, just interesting, you know, the hoops that people make you jump through. We've streamlined a lot of that, so it is a little bit faster process than it used to be. But again, if you do want to move your IRA over to us at Digital Wealth Partners, we can work with you to do that. And we will have proprietary ways to generate additional returns inside of those accounts, tax deferred or tax free, depending on what type of IRA you have. So a lot of structured products coming to market in the future. I do think you're going to see a rotation. You know, we've already kind of started to see it out of Bitcoin into the altcoins. You got BNB at an all-time high. You've got, you know, Solana and XRP breaking out. XRP is sitting on top of its all-time high, waiting to push higher here. I was hoping we'd get some news today from the White House on the crypto stockpile, but it was really just a manifesto about the actual implementation of the technology. They did list a few specific digital assets, but nothing on the treasury of the government. It was more of a, like, how can we actually leverage this technology to better society in the US, which I kind of enjoyed. They're looking at the tangible outcomes and the utilization of these protocols across multiple industries and how that could actually affect things and benefit people versus, you know, which meme coin's going to pump and how I'm going to pump my bags, which is how a lot of people think, unfortunately, in this industry. Or fortunately, you can make a lot of money doing that. I don't poo-poo it. We have clients that have made a lot of money pumping meme coins and then rolling those gains into more blue chip cryptos. You got XRP, XLM, HBAR, Algorand. Some people like Quant. I don't know about Quant. A lot of people hold Bitcoin. We got people Solana, Ethereum, a lot of the blue chips, right? Things with larger market caps that hopefully have staying power. We'll see what happens with Tether. You know, I hadn't talked about that a little bit. They've been a little quiet, which is interesting to me. But I do think we are going to get some stable coins here in the near future to get rolled out. And we are, again, these structured products and streamlining systems to be able to launch ETFs. I think that'll be a big deal because as long as you're meeting those standards, you'll get to see, you know, people launch probably Hedera ETFs will go live very quickly. XLM, I expect not too long in the future. Chainlink, many things. You know, Hedera has a few that have been proposed, but there's a lot of assets that I think are valuable. XDC that just haven't had any ETFs or interest on them. And the other cool part about a lot of these networks is if they have some type of native staking mechanism that could be used to pay distributions to the investors in those ETFs, which is a big deal. Most ETFs don't pay any type of return or distribution. It's just upside on them, right? And maybe you have some type of indexed ETF that has multiple assets producing income through staking rewards and other mechanisms, and that then pays you a really nice return, or a blended return, so that you have, diversification across the asset class, income or cash flow. And if it's, listed, maybe you can draw a margin against it. So, I've talked about this in the past and I have videos on it, but my three main things that I look at for investing: one, real ROI, does better than inflation; two, cash flow of some kind; and three, the ability to borrow against it or draw margin against it. Real estate does this very nicely and illustrates it for most people. You could think about that. Dividend paying stocks are another option, which is what, these ETFs that might have a staking component added to them would have. And if you could withdraw them in kind, man, I think that that's going to revolutionize the adoption of this, especially by native crypto people that have bought the underlying asset. If you were able to redeem it in kind, I think there would be a lot less friction and more people would participate in the ETFs. So excited about all of those things coming. But without any further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the questions here and run it down in the chat. And again, want to thank you guys for hanging out with me on a Wednesday night. We got Flyfish and Jeremy. He says JC of XRP. We got JC of XRP right here. This gentleman, I'm not sure if it's the same gentleman, but he got me an ounce of silver. Pretty cool. He was there in Vegas at XRP Vegas and shared that with me at our event. Again, more in-person events than any other community in digital assets, maybe other than Bored Ape Yacht Club in the Beyond Broke Mastermind. He's had a long conversation with Fred Fuentes at the Las Vegas Beyond Broke Mastermind event after the Link 2 about this Link 2 situation. He clearly had a lot of money locked up in the platform. Is he on your side of all this? Thanks. So I haven't talked about, what we're doing publicly with Link 2, trying to mitigate losses for people. If you guys haven't followed Free Link 2, I would go check that out. Go check out Rob Cunningham and what his group has put together. Kind of in opposition to John Deaton and his lawsuit against Bill. I mean, not really. Just really praying for all the people that have money on that platform. If what was filed in the lawsuit is accurate, the way that they structured the SPVs and put stuff together is not anywhere close to how it's supposed to be done. I mean, we literally wrote the book on it, if you guys don't know. This is called Wealth in Numbers. We put this out at the end of last year, Max Avery and I, mostly Max Avery. I was co-author on there, so I appreciate Max on that. But how to structure syndications, SPVs, Reg D deals here in the US, whether it's 506B or 506C. You can read that book and learn all about it, how to do that in a regulated way. You don't need any licenses to do that. Just so you guys know, you don't have to be, it helps, obviously, if you have oversight from FINRA, if you are an IRA. But anybody can syndicate a deal here in the US and raise some capital and invest it in things. And we have a whole platform called Syndicately. If that interests you, you can literally run your own deal. And we have the lowest barrier to entry possible on that. So it's free to get started. You do have to pre-auth a card, and it is $1,500 if you don't raise any money in the first 90 days. But normally you would have to go out to an attorney, draft all the documents, PPM, subscription agreement, operating agreement. You'd have to, get them to form the entities for you. You got to pay a fund admin. You're going to, set up the bank accounts. You got to find a bank that's going to be willing to work with you to be able to do that. To set up an omnibus account to pool capital. There's not a ton of them. And then, you got to raise the money. You got to go talk to investors and get them to, invest and sign your subscription agreements and manage all the paperwork and do all the admin. And then you got to file the Reg D forms with Edgar. You got to get your CIK number if you've never run a deal before. There's just on and on admin stuff. And if you've never run a deal, you don't know about that. So again, if you want to, if you think you can syndicate a deal, you have a cool startup, you have some private equity investments, anybody can do it. And you can use our platform called Syndicately to run those deals. So reach out. Love to have a conversation with you if that's the case. But anyway, back to Link 2. They didn't form any of this stuff correctly, which is unfortunate. So I think there's a way that they could sort it out if they can pull it out of bankruptcy, where people end up getting the shares. I'm pretty confident in that, actually. But as it sits today, it does sit in bankruptcy, and everybody is a creditor, a unsecured creditor, which means it'll end up being worse than Straight Path. So Straight Path was another situation like this, where a lot of people invested in the platform. They actually had malicious activity and there was fraud, and they didn't invest in some of the deals. I'm pretty confident that Link2 actually has all of the shares. I think the way that they structured it, they broke some rules that are out there by the SEC, and the underlying SPVs didn't actually have the shares in them. So anyway, it'll be an accounting nightmare, but I think there's a way to do it to be able to get people their money back, as long as it stays out of bankruptcy. If it continues into bankruptcy, Straight Path ended up being a receivership. The receiver takes control of it. The company no longer has control of the assets, and then they sell them off as they need to and pay back the investors. Those investors, after all the legal costs and years and years and years, like 3 years worth of back and forth, ended up with about 45 cents on the dollar for what they invested in the platform. So just think about that. If you're advocating for this bankruptcy for Link2, I would start to think about pivoting on that. There is an option that's not bankruptcy for restructuring that's a viable path forward. So anyway, hate that for everybody that has shares on that platform. Can't talk about the stuff that we do in the Mastermind publicly, but if you want to know more about that, you can join for free with the code above. Tomorrow's the last day. We got Ricky. He says, "Hey Jake, my message got missed on Monday, but hopefully this one makes it. You got it, dude. I'm sorry I missed you. And thank you for the double super chats." He says, "Why is oil starting to rise again? You can see $100 XRP by October. Thanks from the UK." Again, I'm highly confident. The only thing, well, we saw Fed Jerome Powell hold rates. They're not going to move. They're not going to move until they absolutely have to. We don't have inflation here in the U.S. We have actual GDP growth, more growth than it showed it was supposed to be or was predicted for Q2. And so they're looking at it like we have a healthy economy. And honestly, where rates are at right now is where they should be. If you have a growing economy, you should be able to support somewhere between a 5 and 6% interest rate. We're a little lower than that. I think we're like 4.5 or 4 3/4. But people are so used to free money for the last 15 years that it's hard to break that habit. But I do think they could actually raise interest rates. I know that that's counterintuitive to what most people think, and I don't think they will. I think that you're going to see the U.S. interest rates come down. I think you're going to see a big fall in the stock market when the reverse carry trade unwinds, and they're going to aggressively lower rates at the same time as Japan's raising rates. And the only way that you're going to be able to save the treasury market when they do that is to, they've already passed stablecoin regulation. So all of those treasuries that people in Japan, $1.6 trillion worth of treasuries, will flow onto the market to chase yields in Japan, which is great for their economy. They haven't had that in 30 years. Had stagflation in their economy with zero interest rates and sometimes negative interest rates at times. So really excited for Japan to have a healthy economy and be able to see growth. And there are people there investing in their own bonds, which has been bought back by the Bank of Japan over and over and over again. They levered themselves up and printed yen to be able to do it because nobody else wants them because they're not paying any interest. But if they raise rates aggressively because of oil, you will see people dump U.S. treasuries, especially if we're lowering rates, to swap into those. And again, I put out a whole video on this if you guys want to go check it out on the channel. It's on the reverse carry trade. It was just a couple days ago. And I talk about, XRP being a liquidity buffer between the exchange of the US dollar and the yen to be able to, unplug or keep out the bottleneck on the FX market and crashing the FX market, basically. Because you're going to have all of that money flooding back to Japan all at one time and US Treasuries being dumped. And that's when you'll see stablecoins too, because there's going to be a lot of people that want to issue stablecoins and buy up those treasuries cheap, to back it. And then hopefully over time we can raise rates again and they get a pretty good yield. Like Tether, right? Tether is a very profitable business, most profitable business in the world per capita. They have like 100 employees and doing as much or close to BlackRock, like pretty lucrative for stablecoins, and the banks want their piece on that. So I do think, all that is going to play out in the not too distant future. And, like I mentioned in that video, it would require like $150 to $180 XRP just for that specific circumstance to provide a liquidity buffer to manage that, $10 trillion flowing back to Japan over a 30-day period. We got Robert. What's up, man? He says, we feel beat down. No rate cut. Need good news. It's good news, dude. If they cut rates, you would see markets slipping. You would see your crypto selling off. I know a lot of people are like, yeah, rate cuts, markets go higher. And they normally are right. Unfortunately, in this circumstance, they would be wrong. They would be caught wrong-footed because of the reverse carry trade and because of that unwind. You would see money flooding out of markets instead of into markets like you normally get during a rate cut. We got Prez Nick. He says, Jake, my guy, need your expert. We know that DAG is an option, of course, but what are other options you would look at for financial standpoint to get 3 to 5% on XRP after price appreciation? And he puts his goal here. I want to give props to Nick because he wants to make $30,000 a month in income passively. Dude, fantastic. He's mapped it out. He probably knows that, he needs 15 grand to cover his nut or his dream lifestyle, and he wants to be financially free, which is 2 times your expenses in passive income. That's my definition of financially free. So kudos to you for actually putting a number to it, man. Most people don't have that. I would say probably 5% of people actually put a number to it. That's what a financial advisor is for, certified financial planner. If you come talk to our team, we'll help you do that, but you've done it on your own, so kudos. Getting 3 to 5% on the XRP. So, you need about $10 million a month. $10 million worth of XRP is going to pay you, what would that be? You need a little bit more than that. If you're making, let's call it 5%. So if you're making 5% on 10 million, what is that? $500,000 a year. So that's, if it was $600,000, it'd be 50 grand a month. So a little less than that. So about 10 million would set you up, and somewhere between 3 and 5%. Doing good. Okay. So there's not anything at this point, unfortunately. We're going to have in the near future the safest possible way that you can park your XRP with Digital Wealth Partners and earn yield on it. What we're looking at right now is somewhere between 2 and 4%. Sat there, kind of like a CD. Park it, it's locked, prints more XRP or more cash for you. And it's no risk. That's what we're working on currently. And I'm hopeful, depends on the accounting mechanism at Anchorage. But in the near future, we should have that capability. And the PR campaign that we're going to have when we announce that is going to be wild. So if that tells you anything about who could be involved, I can't say it because we have NDAs, but excited about it nonetheless. So people are looking at Flare. People are looking at, we talked to Doppler. I will say that I like the way that they've structured their stuff. It's very similar to how we've structured our stuff. They use Copper as their institutional custody. I have some higher, standards when it comes to institutional custody than just Copper. But the benefit of Copper is Copper Clear Loop or Copper Pledge. And so that allows your assets to stay inside custody with Copper in your account and then they delegate that somewhere else or represent it somewhere else that they can draw margin against and trade in a market neutral strategy. Now, they've streamlined that and they've got it in a DeFi deal, right? It's in a smart contract. The problem that I currently have with smart contracts is somebody could still exploit it. They're uninsured and they're hackable. So I would rather do it a traditional way through, maybe like a prime broker or somebody else that's going to provide liquidity on that position, and represent that value somewhere else. And that's what we do. We use the XRP. It stays in institutional custody. That value is reflected on another platform like Binance, and then we have partners that have strong track records, somewhere between 5 and 6 years long, producing 20 to 40% returns every single year. Now there's big fluctuations in their returns quarter over quarter, but pretty good, right? And as we get 80% margin against the XRP. They trade somewhere between 50 and 60% of that credit line. So we project, or we're targeting, somewhere between 8 and 20% returns on that XRP. There's some risk there. So I can talk about the growth fund and both funds, because they're 506C. You have to be accredited to participate in these. If these sound cool to you, you can reach out to Digital Wealth Partners and learn more. So the income fund, I think we paid an average check of like $1,500 to the LPs and the clients at Digital Wealth Partners in early this month. It was like the third week of this month. We paid $1,500 to almost everybody that participated in that fund. Now, there's a lot of money in that. I think between all the funds, after the capital call tomorrow, we should have close to $200 million worth of XRP put to work in the funds, which is the most of anybody. Like, there's not anybody else doing it bigger than us, which is pretty cool. I'm biased and I'm proud. So anyway, that's after we do the capital call on Friday for these next round of funds. But the two that we have that paid out, I think the first one paid like 70 basis points. So nothing to write home about, nothing crazy, but still free money for parking your XRP with us, basically. And then in addition to that, our growth fund actually lost a little bit of money the first quarter because it trades on trends and it trades on futures. It's rolling futures. And because there wasn't a trend over the last quarter and it was like sideways, they actually lost 0.66%. So like 66 basis points. But as soon as July turned around, we're up and we've already bought back double that amount of XRP. So we've made those people whole and added to their position at the 1st of July here. And they're already poised for the next leg up. That fund did 20% in November last year when XRP went on a tear in 1 month. So pretty cool. And that's compounding XRP. So those people are generating additional XRP by participating in that deal. So it's not staking. It's not native to the blockchain, but it's an innovative solution that we've put together to be able to, create these returns for people on their asset. So you never sell it. You still get the upside in the asset, and you're generating cash flow or doubling down and making more XRP. And again, either one of those, I think we still have a few spots open on both those funds. You can absolutely reach out to Digital Wealth Partners. They do capital calls at the beginning of each month. You have to have the assets over there around like the 20th in order to be able to make the cutoff for those. So if you're interested, I'd love to have you. And then, you mentioned here, so Doppler Finance, we're gonna talk to them. We'll see, what comes about that. They don't operate with any US-based people. There's some people that use VPNs and are getting around their geofencing. Bad. Shouldn't be doing that. But they're concerned about the securities laws here. And so until there's, the Clarity Act and how to be able to offer DeFi to, US investors, they've kind of geofenced this off. So if we work something out, it'd be cool to kind of be their gateway for that. But they might be another resource for that type of return. And there's really not anything else out there. You know, the Flare deal, somebody asked me about that earlier today. I interviewed Hugo. I think that he's brilliant. I love what he's doing. I just like battle-tested stuff, and I will be a strategic first mover on things, but not with a lot. So I'll test the water first, and I would let other people test the water first also. Sometimes you get, you know, less of an advantage if you're not an early mover. So I like to be calculated. If there's greater returns to be generated, I'll be an early mover, but I'm not going to put my whole bag in there. You know what I mean? And I would like to do it inside of institutional custody. He was nice enough to share with me how that might be possible after the podcast that we did together. So we're working on those things. And I think you could get the best of both worlds. I think you could get, you know, the benefit of DeFi and the Flare network and the stablecoin, you know, using XRP and futures to hedge the stability of XRP, which I thought was brilliant. And then you can put that to, you know, work in the Flare protocol and earn some returns. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of creative financial structuring as this asset class continues to grow. And just as crazy as derivatives are for the banks, I think that you'll see some other pretty crazy stuff. And we're working on that. You know, we're looking to hire quants and people that are pretty intelligent to be able to orchestrate portfolio allocations and generate cash flows, hedge inflation, mitigate downside risk, and then also, you know, if you're rolling that into real estate or some other things, you're able to get the cost seg on that to offset some of the income, because that's the other piece of this is taxation. Again, I want capital gains to be, you know, zero on all that stuff too, but income's still going to be income tax unless we go to this Jasara thing and it all just goes away and the IRS is gone, which I would also love. Just saying that. I don't care for the IRS, but I also don't want to go to jail. So we help people mitigate taxes legally with all the stuff that we do. This person said, just ordered 2 biometric wallets off your page. Appreciate the help. Awesome, dude. I'm glad to hear that. Decent is our cold wallet of choice. I am going to do a podcast with those guys also. Presnick also says, Jake, we need a domino theory part 4 time frame on that. If Ripple opens up a bank, do you think they will let us get a HYS account and earn on XRP? No. Got to be careful here. Ripple is a B2B business. They don't sell to consumers or retail. And they're not going to structure products for retail. Now, they might face off with a single counterparty that worked with retail, but they themselves, I don't think, will open up retail accounts. And I can tell you that for sure, just based on the one interaction I've ever had with them. When they made the acquisition of Standard Custody, we were the only wealth management client that Standard Custody worked with. And when they made that acquisition, they said, move along, little one. And I'm like, but you guys have the best custody. Like, I want to keep my clients' assets here. And they said, well, we don't want to deal with you. We don't want to deal direct with, you know, retail clients. And all of those were segmented instances that we had for our clients there. Just like at Anchorage, but we have an overarching account that we manage all of the accounts under at Anchorage, where we didn't have that sub-ledger capability with Standard Custody. So all of the clients were direct. You know, it was a tri-party agreement with us and them. So they said, you know, you got to move all these off here. But they've circled, you know, maybe they'll circle back around and we'll see. So no, I don't think there's going to be any direct relationship with consumers or high net worth individuals directly with Ripple, unless you have a lot of XRP. And even if you do, like, we had close to 30 million XRP there at Standard Custody. No, it was $30 million worth of XRP. So that was like a lot of XRP, and they didn't want it because I asked them directly. I said, "Hey, can we, partner with you on ODL and like earn a yield on the client's XRP?" And they said, "We have 4.8 billion XRP. Why do we need yours?" Excuse me, for for trying to help people out and partner with you guys. So anyway, again, I've had these interactions, other people haven't, and so and I could be wrong. Maybe they completely surprised me, but based on the previous interactions I've had with Ripple, it's highly unlikely in my mind that they will create some type of consumer-facing product or division to allow people to participate with them. And the domino theory part 4, I really kind of said everything I need to say in domino theory part 3. We talked about oil. We talked about, well, okay, I could revise the Tether part because obviously, that didn't take place. There's 2 options on the Tether now. One, they're sanctioned because of some association with Epstein or other illicit activity, which for sure. I don't know about the Epstein part, but for sure evading sanctions and SWIFT from Iran and Russia. But in addition to that, the other piece could be if the reverse carry trade does cause global credit crisis, if they're holding private credit or private debt on their books as backing, that could deleverage. Those companies could go bankrupt. And then that backing would no longer be there, would go to zero overnight, and Tether could depeg. I think if Tether depegged, man, you would see mass liquidation from all across the markets. The whole thing would unravel very quickly. Very similar to what you saw with Luna and even USDT depegged during that deal because everybody was scared, getting out of the market, selling off their stablecoin positions. So anytime there's a bank run, if there's a bank run on Tether and their debt or their stuff on their balance sheet goes bad, there's some other problems there. So that's kind of my new thesis. If there is a Tether component, which I think there is, it's one of those 2 things. Silverado Man says, what events do you see playing out in August? Hopefully this ETF standardization gets passed. That would be great. I see stablecoins launching in August. I see a rotation out of Bitcoin and certain other assets. I'm hoping that we get the XRP ETFs in August. I think that we will. And if that's the case, then I think you're going to see a lot of the other stuff that I've talked about as well play out. So, I'm as hopeful as you guys are. Obviously, I made the bet with scams, which is an account on Twitter, that XRP would be $750 by the end of the year. So if I'm going to put, my money where my mouth is, I'm confident in enough to do it. And I do think that events are going to play out. We got KK Pond. He says, if we custody XRP with Anchorage after price appreciation, is there any risk of negative yield? Huh? Or will it consistently stay around 2 to 5%? Also, tons of great resources in the Mastermind. Sign up before it's too late. Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. Try to provide as much value as we can there in the Mastermind. And again, tomorrow is the last day. The last day you'll ever be able to sign up for free for the Mastermind. So if that sounds cool to you, if you've been on the fence and you're like, I don't know, it's free. Like, you don't have to stick around. If you don't stick around, that's okay. We get it. We're not for everybody. I'm cool with that. But if you do want to get in and try it for free, this is your last shot. Tomorrow is the last day we're ever doing it. You're just going to use the code BEYONDBROKE, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO gets you a free month there in the group. And again, you just cancel before the 30 days is up, and you don't get charged if you don't like it. So to my point earlier, as long as it's a risk-free yield, no. It'll be put to work in like a reverse repo overnight carry between banks. So if reverse repo fails, we got a lot bigger problems than, negative yields on your XRP. Like the world's collapsing type thing. So answer is no. As long as you have full faith in the US government and the banking system, which I know, me either. But It's the best. It's the safest thing we got. So, and they're back. Like they can print money anytime they want. So that's not going away. So no chance of negative yields as long as it's in a yield-bearing product. You'll always be guaranteed those yields, and that's the difference between yield and return. And why I always say returns on the fund, because there is a chance that things go negative on the fund. We saw that in the first quarter on the growth fund, but we're already up 5% this month. So again, it's kind of like crypto, right? Like there's no guarantees in crypto, but you also make hundreds of percents in a day. Sometimes you lose 50% in a day. Like if you want, the upside, you got to risk it for the biscuit. We do that on a much smaller scale in market neutral strategies with very low risk of loss. But on a risk curve, it's like, 1 being no risk, 10 being all the risk in the world. I call it like a 1.7, a 1.8. There's no counterparty risk. So, that's the biggest thing for me. I want to be bankruptcy remote. I want to make sure the assets are somewhere where they're not ever going to get liquidated or taken. If somebody else, decides to take too much risk, we're not subject to that. And that's why we've structured this. There's no counterparty risk, and there's no smart contract counterparty risk with the way that we do it either. So again, that's why I would rather stick with my strategy in the short term until we have like really proven that there's no issues with the smart contracts. They're insured by like Nexus or somebody else or Lloyd's of London. They're in institutional custody. The assets stay in my account and they're reflected somewhere else using pseudo accounts on the XRPL. There's a lot of amendments on the XRPL that I'm looking forward to. David Schwartz talked about permission domains today and the way that would keep bad actors or terrorists from transacting on the network in certain environments. And so we need that one to pass. I think it only has like 7 votes. But if we do want XRP to be used in a global capacity for markets at scale, on the open source network, you need that. Now, private permissioned ecosystems like R3 that settle through XRP probably are fine to be used right now before that passes. So we'll see. I could see price appreciation before all that comes through, and then shortly after that we get global adoption. Mark, what's up, man? He says, thank you for sharing all your input and knowledge with us. I have a bag of ETH and XRP. I was thinking of converting some of my ETH into XRP. Do you think ETH sees a bigger pump first before XRP does? Mark, I would love to be able to rub my crystal ball and know exactly what was going to happen in the market, but I have no clue. And I would love to be able to give you financial advice. I am also not a financial advisor. And that probably cues me to go ahead and give my disclaimer that I have to. This is for my legal. Okay, just for you, compliance. All the opinions shared this evening and on this channel are my own. They are not opinions of Digital Ascension Group or Digital Wealth Partners, the firms that I own. These are separate in my opinions. In addition to that, I'm not a financial advisor. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. If you do want financial advice, go speak with, tax or legal advice also, your CPA, your tax attorney, your legal counsel, or your financial advisor before making any financial, legal, or tax decisions. If you need those professionals, we employ all of them and have partnerships to be able to provide you with people that are accredited, certified, and licensed to actually be able to give you that advice. So there's my disclaimer. I wish I could be like, absolutely, swap that ETH for XRP all day long, but I can't say that. So I don't know. ETH, this is my thought. Like ETH has already had a hell of a run. Excuse my French. And XRP has too, if you really think about it. I mean, ETH went from dollars to thousands. XRP went from hundredths of a penny to dollars. So if you just think about it that way, ETH has really kind of had like a 10x greater return already than XRP. And so if you think, ETH is going to have another 10x return before XRP has a 100x return, probably keep it in ETH, especially if you bought early. And you have to deal, and there's tax implications, right? Like I didn't even talk about that. I don't know what your basis is in either one of these things. I've seen people borrow against their Bitcoin and buy XRP. I don't condone that. I'm not recommending it. I'm just telling you these. I've seen people do it. We do provide the ability to borrow against your ETH or your Bitcoin or your XRP or your Solana at Digital Wealth Partners at fairly reasonable interest rates. They're not great, just candidly, somewhere between 10 and 16% on the high side. Terms are usually 12 months. LTV somewhere between, depends on the asset, but as low as 45 and up to 80. Again, depends on the asset. You can draw down liquidity against it, especially if you do think that we're going to move higher in the market before we go lower. Probably a good time to, if you, I'm not condoning this, but if you were going to take leverage, you would probably want to take it at a time when you thought the market was going to move higher. That way you won't get liquidated, because there is that risk. There's always downside risk in the market. And, we don't use like Aave or Compound. It's not a decentralized lending protocol. We have counterparties that, lend the USDC to us and our clients. And so they will work with you and they will let you know if something happens and you have some time to get your stuff structured and done and capital added to your account before they'll liquidate you. They're very amicable. Our partners are awesome. I'm so glad that we've been able to curate the relationships that we have, because a lot of people do want access to these products, but they're scared to do it in a DeFi protocol because you will just get liquidated. Aave or Compound, there's no human emotion. There's no human counterpart that you can talk to and sort stuff out with. So again, it's good to have people and some grace when those things are going on. And they've always been great with us to make sure that we could alert our clients and give them time to top up their capital if they needed to before they ever liquidated anything. And I don't think we've ever liquidated anyone for any amount up to this point. We've done like 15 million in loans against digital assets up to this point through Digital Wealth Partners and in the Mastermind. So again, not condoning it, but if you want access to be able to borrow against those 4 assets, we have strategic partners in the Mastermind, which you can join for free. One more day. After tomorrow, we cut off the free. So you can join Carbon 1, which is the level that is required for the lending, just by using this code up here, Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO gets you a free month there in the group. And you can take advantage of our partnerships that we've curated for the people in that community. We have over 5,000 members. Can you guys believe that? That is hard for me to wrap my head around. The community is growing so quickly, so blessed and so grateful to have you guys on the journey with us. And again, I just want to say, none of this is possible without you guys. I wake up humbled and grateful every single day for all the people that want to work with us and partner with us. I'm solving these problems. I solve these problems selfishly for myself and my family. And I'm just, super blessed to be able to share that with the community and provide these products and services. And the team that we have, I definitely couldn't do it without all of the employees and friends and team that we have at Digital Wealth Partners and Digital Ascension Group. Just again, feel super blessed. But we'll get on to the questions here. We got William. He says, hey, legend. What's up, man? Missed my super chat. Damn, see? I'm sorry, William. And you paid again. I'm sorry, dude. I wish I could refund people's super chats if I didn't get to them. Maybe I can. Maybe I'll figure that out. But I've got you now. So he says, if XRP's price appreciates drastically shortly, why not be in XXRP, then convert to XRP down the road to get more? That's a great question, William. I'll say this. And again, I'm not condoning any of these things. Okay. Again, not financial advice, just talking about things I've seen done. We had some people borrow against their XRP, and instead of buying more XRP, they put it in XXRP. So they used a lot of leverage here. But if you're convicted that it's going to go to the upside, I mean, They've already done pretty good. I'm just saying. So, yes, to your point. Now, there's a problem there. They're trading futures. So again, you're not going to get access to the underlying asset if you're in XXRP. You're going to have to convert back to cash in traditional markets. So that's a consideration. If you do want this asset and you want the appreciation over the long term, you want to be able to borrow against it and leverage and put it to work and earn income, you need to be in the asset itself and not in the ETF or the futures ETF that's leveraged XXRP. But, you know, you are going to get 2 times the return if you catch it right, because there are perpetual futures. So if you just left it in XXRP, you really only get the appreciation of XRP. You don't get the 2 times upside unless you're trading it. So just be aware of that. If you're in an IRA, that's where things get cool, because you're tax deferred or tax free, depending on what type of IRA you have. That would be a really cool environment to trade in and out of XXRP in. Again, not a financial advisor, not financial advice, just talking about things I've seen people do. We got Michael. What's up, Michael? He says, hey, Jake, just curious on what ETF XRP needs to have a price increase, and then there will be taking place for ETFs. I'll read that one more time because I didn't quite get it. Hey, spelt like hey, Jake. Just curious on what ETF XRP needs to have a price increase, and when will that be taking place for ETFs? I'm going to guess at what you want here, because the question, the way it's written, doesn't really make sense. Or maybe it's really late and I'm off my game. Also possible. I think he's asking, does there need to be a price increase for XRP for the ETFs to get listed? I think it's actually the other way around. You're going to need the ETFs to get listed to cause a supply shock on the XRP to get the price appreciation. And that's when the increase will take place, after the ETFs go live. Now, could there be other supply and demand dynamics that cause price appreciation before that? Sure, there could be treasury companies. There could be a liquidity crisis on exchanges because of Tether. There could be, you know, compounding other factors that would cause price appreciation before the ETFs go live. But I do think the ETFs will then just exacerbate the price appreciation of XRP. We got Bo Harvey. What's up, man? He says, after all the ETFs pass possible IPO, OCC adoption, et cetera, can you talk about 26 to 28 and get me pumped up about Codius, what Codius is in the derivatives market, and how XRP could be worth, how much XRP could be worth? Thanks, brother. Great question here. So I talked about this on Brad Lee's show, and a lot of people have, you know, kind of latched onto that because we chopped it up into a short and put it out for people. A marketing team is good. I'll just say that. Like, yeah, I'm normally against the clickbaity stuff. I don't like the clickbaity stuff, but I will say this: people want to hear the crazy prices, and they want to understand why something could get to a crazy price, right? Because a lot of people are like, yeah, it's going to be $10,000. And you're like, well, but how does it do that? And they're like, they flip a switch. Get out of here with that. That's not a thing, okay? You need enough value to move into XRP because of supply and demand dynamics on the open market for total available supply, not total supply, but total available supply. And that's why you get a market cap multiplier like Zach Rector and Crypto Sensei and some of these other guys talk about. Okay, I don't break all that down, but the gist of it is there's like, you know, 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion XRP available on the market, and there's 100 billion total. And so the multiplier is going to be, you know, like if there was 1 billion XRP available and you bought all of that and the price went up, you know, that price then gets transferred across all the other XRP that's out there. So the market cap goes 100x the amount of capital that was actually put into XRP. Hopefully that makes sense. So how do we get to derivatives? Well, you're going to have all these other markets first. And you got to have custody, which they have. You got to have KYC, AML, digital identity, accreditation. A lot of the amendments that are being passed on the XRPL right now are going to need to be formalized and integrated and trialed and tested. AMMs is another big piece of that. Automated market makers need to be at scale, over the next 2 years in multiple applications and markets before we really see derivatives come about. So I had a guy message me about derivatives earlier today, and this is the example I give for derivatives. You're in Vegas. You're at the Super Bowl. You're watching the game. You have a bet on the game. Okay. And you got $100. Just $100 on the game that your team wins. The guy in front of you turns around and he says, "Hey man, can I borrow $100?" So you lend him the 100 that you already have on the game to the other guy. Okay. He talks to the guy next to him and he says, "Hey, I bet there's a flag on this play in the game. And I'm going to bet 100x leverage. I'm going to put down my 100 that I borrowed from the guy behind me, and I bet you 10,000 that there's a flag on this play." And then the guy next to you overhears that. And he says, "Hey man, I bet you this $100 that guy that you were talking to just gave me." So he lent it to him. And then he turned around and lent it to the other guy that's now betting you. Okay. That he ends up punching him after he loses this bet. And I'm going to put this 100 down, and I'm also going to take 100x leverage on it for 10,000. Will you take my bet? Like, that's how wild derivatives are. It's the same collateral. They use US Treasuries lent 9 and 10 times over to multiple counterparties that are sometimes betting against each other, and they take leverage on it. And that's why it's quadrillions of dollars, and they can't determine the notional value of it because there's so many sketchy, crazy things going on, and it's unregulated that they can't even assess the risk. It's not quantifiable. So you need a unified ledger. You need a neutral bridge asset. You need good collateral that can't be rehypothecated to step in and regulate that market. And once we see the adoption of a network or a protocol that allows for everybody to participate on a level playing field, that has a neutral bridge asset and a way to lock collateral so that it can't be rehypothecated or leveraged beyond the necessity of like what it should be, now you can assess the risk in that market because you can see all the constraints. You could lay an AI over it and be like, "Oh, there's too much leverage being built into this part of the economy because people are taking, unnecessary risk over here. We need to slow that down. And maybe there's not enough leverage over here." So same reason the Soviet Union collapsed, there was misappropriation of resources, and that's what causes large fluctuations in markets. If you had something that could bring things back to equilibrium, not as much money to be made, but also you're going to even out a lot of these crashes that we've seen, this boom bust cycle that we've had over and over again. So good and bad, right? It's not always great, but at the same time, like that's the level. And if we get that adoption, I mean, you can imagine if it is on the higher end, like I think it probably is, closer to $3 or $4 quadrillion being traded in derivatives, and that's being settled through XRP. It's a lot of money, like a lot of money. But you would need, supply and demand dynamics to push it to a price that had enough liquidity to be able to settle that. Realistically, as XRP burns and more of it's locked up, $10, $50, $100,000 XRP could be viable. I don't think in the time frame that you mentioned there. I am aggressive in my time frame for adoption and price appreciation, but I really do think that's going to take till 2030. I said 5 years on the Bradley podcast, and I'm going to stick with that. I think around 2030 is when we see the maturity of these protocols and networks really being adopted at scale and implemented in that capacity for prices at that level. But if you can hang out 5 years, you got 1,000 XRP, just like you could hang out 10 years ago with 1,000 Bitcoin. We've been doing pretty good. Been doing pretty good. Spinny B says, Jake, thoughts on, I heard you mention last week that R3 is an XRP competitor. They're not a competitor. They're a Ripple competitor. If so, are you concerned about that? Thanks so much. So in 2014-15, Ripple actually was sued by R3 for the $5 billion XRP or 5 billion XRP that they had pre-negotiated pricing on. And that's when FinCEN regulated XRP currency, separate case, but about that same time. And the lawsuit ended up being settled for 1.04 billion XRP to R3. R3 Corda does not have a native token to be able to settle value between siloed ecosystems. It leverages other networks to be able to facilitate that, ones that have enough liquidity and are regulated appropriately. The only thing here in the XRP, in domestically in the US that could facilitate that would be XRP, and really the only thing globally also. They are interoperable with XDC, and there's probably a point in the future where there's enough liquidity in XDC to take up some of those payment flows and be a more liquid corridor in certain circumstances. But I'm confident that's going to be a while, and especially for the back end of the stock market, which was a project ION that was developed by the DTCC and R3. They use private permissioned ecosystems, and they settle between those using, guess what? XRP. So even though they're a competitor, technically to Ripple, they still use the same settlement mechanism. So choose whichever one you want, Swift. Still going to have to settle through XRP. And that's the rub. All right, we're way up here. We're already an hour in, so I'm going to try to go lightning round through the rest of these, and I know I'm not going to make it through the rest of the super chats. So again, I apologize. I'm going to try to get to the bottom here. So if you haven't super chatted already, don't waste your money. I feel really bad if people pay and I don't answer their questions. So if you haven't super chatted at least an hour in here, probably hold off and don't send it, because I'm probably not going to get to it and I'm going to feel bad about it. So if you have questions, again, I answer all the questions people DM me in the mastermind. I took 45 minutes out of my day and answered 100 different questions today for people there in the mastermind. We got over 5,000 people. And again, you direct access to me. I'm in there twice a week, talk there on Saturdays and Mondays, 2 hours on Saturday, about 30 minutes on Mondays. We have another separate call on Tuesday nights for Carbon 2, which is the higher tier. Got about 80 people in that one. It's a lot more intimate. We do not record that one, so people share some personal stuff there, and so do I. But, again, if you just want access, you get in for free. Tomorrow's the last day. One more day is all you got to get in for free in the mastermind. If you want to use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized, number 1, and then MO. And you can ask me whatever question you want. You just DM me. I will say this also. When you come in, there are scammers. Do not engage with the scammer. I will not message you. Okay? If they are pretending to be me and they message you and talk about a flare drop token or anything else that's sketchy, block, report, run away. I will not message you ever in the mastermind unless you message me first. If you message me first, I will talk to you all day, but I will never reach out to you. So if you come into the mastermind and somebody messages you and they pretend to be me, they are pretending. They are a scammer. Do not engage with them, report them, and block them immediately. And that pretty much goes on every other platform too. I do not reach out to other people unless it's in, like if it's in the chat and I say, hey, I'm going to message you. Because sometimes people can't message me, like on X. They'll be like, hey, message me, and I'll reach out to people. But that's the only time I ever do that. And I respond in the chat right there and say, hey, I'm going to message you. But any other time, like, do not engage. There's tons of fake. We report probably 100 fake Jakes every single day across all the social media. So be careful out there. Be careful when you come into the mastermind. Do not get hoodwinked. I will not message you, but we do. You can turn that setting off also once you're in there. All right. So again, if you haven't super chatted, probably don't, because I probably won't get to it. Adam says, Jake, super grateful to be part of the mastermind. Awesome, dude. Great service. What's your theory on Bitcoin? I have one. Since the first 34K block are deleted, people in cyber know everything is revocable. Is that? I thought the missing blocks were on the XRP ledger, not on Bitcoin. Maybe. I thought you could get the full provenance of Bitcoin. I don't know. It's either a million or zero. That's my guess on Bitcoin. I've heard some things recently that make me probably lean towards zero. When's that going to happen? I don't know. People have been wrong betting against it for a long time. I thought the top was 75,000. Wrong. I was wrong. And again, when I'm wrong, I just come out and say it. But yeah, it's one or the other. I think zero is looking more likely to me than a million, but it's 70-30 at this point for me. I'm 70% zero, 30% a million on Bitcoin. Trident. It's a cool name. Have around 500K in an IRA. What's the best way to go about purchasing XRP with it before appreciation? Liquidate it and just eat the taxes. Again, can't give you financial advice, but I'm going to walk you through some scenarios because I don't know how old you are, Trident. I liquidated my IRA, but I'm in my early 30s. So you can't take distributions until you're 59 and a half, which is a long way away from me, like a long way. I want to be able to leverage that capital, be able to borrow against it, earn returns, pay myself money off of it, do other things with it. And so for me, when it was 30 cents, a long time ago, I decided I was going to go ahead and liquidate it in kind, pulled it out in kind, owed the taxes, owed the fees, but it was not that much money because it was the 30 cents. If I was doing it now, I would owe a lot more, right? So again, up to you, not here to give you financial advice, just walk you through some scenarios. So again, depending on your age, it may be better or worse, just depends what you think. If you're like already in your 50s, probably just let it ride. You're not that far from it. If you're earlier than that, I met with a couple that was in their 40s, barely 40. They were barely 40, and they had a pretty sizable allocation to XRP in their 401k. Or sorry, you can't have it in a 401k, in their IRA. And I was like, this is what I did. You can't borrow against it if it's inside of an IRA. You really can't do much with it. We're going to have the algorithmic trading strategy to be able to compound it. But outside of that, like it just grows. You can't really do much with it until you're 59 and a half. So if you're a long way away from that, it might, up to you, can't give you financial advice, but it might be worth eating the fees and paying taxes. Now, if you, to build up that amount in an IRA, you've probably been working at a company for a while. You've probably, got the contributions from a corporation and then you rolled it into something else, from a 401k to a self-directed IRA. Maybe you had some really good returns on something also. That's quite possible. Because IRAs, you can own any asset in an IRA, private equity even. So if you wanted to move it to Digital Wealth Partners, you do have enough. You would absolutely qualify to work with Digital Wealth Partners, and we could work with you if you wanted to transfer it. It sounds like you already got it in cash, so you just send the cash over and we would buy the XRP for you in your account there. And it's an IRA, so we can work with that. The XRP just has to be in a wrapper, or the digital assets have to be in a wrapper. So it has to be in an IRA, has to be in a trust, or it has to be in a corporation for us to work with you, because Anchorage that's their shtick, and probably Ripple too. And that's what I'm saying. Like, people are like, yeah, they're going to deal with retail. Not going to deal with retail. They're going to deal with businesses. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful to you. Appreciate the super chat. And again, would love to work with you on that if that's something you're interested in at Digital Wealth Partners. If you guys have interest in that, I haven't even given you the website. It's digitalwealthpartners.net. You go to the contact us form. Like I said, you do have to have your assets in an LLC, in a trust, in a limited corporation, a self-managed super fund, an IRA. It's got to be something holding your assets besides your personal name. And you do need at least 100,000 XRP or $500,000 in portfolio value in crypto. They will custody XRP, XLM, Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, Matic, Chainlink, Avalanche, and pretty much any other EVM-based token you can think of. We got KJ. What's up? He says, what's your opinion on does XLS 81 permission DEX need to be in place for 4-digit XRP price appreciation to occur? Liquidity pools is a big deal. And permission domains and permission DEX are both a big deal too, because that's how you keep sanctioned and malicious players out of these environments. So for the public network to be adopted at the scale that I think people want it to be, yes. Now, if there are private permissioned ecosystems attached to the public ledger that might need to transact, that could use it before these amendments are passed. That one and permission domains are both at like 7. We need 29 votes on the validators. If you guys want to go check this out, again, if you don't know where to go look for this stuff, go to XRP scan/amendments, and you can see all the votes from the 35 validators that vote for these amendments on the XRPL and when they'll get passed. You can see, the 2-week waiting period after they do get validated. You have to have one more than 80% of the validators vote yes for an amendment for it to go live. So there's actually some really robust governance, and it is decentralized when it comes to the XRPL. Ripple only runs 3 of those validators. The rest are run by universities, the SEC, and other regulatory bodies, large corporations, fintechs, banks, enterprises. They're all running validators on the XRPL if they plan to leverage the protocol and the network to be able to settle value. Or they have a blockchain course at their college and they want people to understand how this stuff works and be able to run a validator. There's courses on that as well. So, you saw MIT, Stanford, some others. Gary taught at MIT before he ended up the chairman of the SEC. And now old Gare Bear is board advisor or something for digital assets at BlackRock. The plot thickens. So anyway, I don't think that it needs to be in place before we see 4 digits, but that's predicated on a pretty big supply shock without that in place and the ability to settle between private permission ecosystems. All right. We're going to go lightning round for the next 45 minutes to get through these. And again, if I'm not as thorough on it, you can always follow up with me in the mastermind. Again, tomorrow's the last day. Last day. One more day for free entry into the mastermind using the code BeyondBroke, the number 1, and then MO gets you a free month. And you can ask me all the questions you want in there. It might take me a little while to get to them. I try to answer people within 48 hours on there, but I will get back to you. Rock Corp, he says, Mr. Claver, legend. Are you familiar with Beam and Casper? I know Casper. What are your thoughts on them? Also, think about buying more Algo, Axelar, ADA, Cardano, DAG, or Flare. Which do you think would be more bang for my buck? I don't think anything would be more bang for your buck than XRP. Can't give you financial advice. That's just literally my holdings. And so I can only talk about what I'm doing. And I try to be transparent with you guys. I like all these projects that you've mentioned here. We run a node for DAG. I've had Hugo on the network for Flare. I've met Charles Hoskinson for ADA. We went to Rare Evo last year. We were a sponsor at the event. I know the Axelar guys. I have, you've seen me in the tank top that they gave us. Algorand, we've met their team. We know some of the seed investors in Algorand. I've had the guy from Casper on the show and went over the protocol and what they're doing there. Beam, I don't know about Beam. I should probably look into it if it's something you're interested in. Hash is the only other thing that I've bought in the last 4 years. 3 years. And I bought a couple grand worth of it. It's Provenance's token. So that's the only other thing that I think has anything close to the upside similar to XRP. And that's why I bought it. And I don't know that it does or doesn't. That's just, I had to go around my butt to get it, kind of like I did XDC when it was 0.03 of a penny. And that one worked out pretty good when it ran to 9 cents. So I think Hash is currently at like 2 cents, something like that. again, not financial advice. Please do your own research. I'm just, he's asked me about a bunch of other tokens. I'm just giving you guys the real deal. I've only ever bought one other token in the last 3 years, and that's the one. So I think, all of those will do well over the long term. I've had almost all those people on my channel and interviewed them. I've talked to all the founders and people involved with those. I still only own XRP, if that tells you anything. 70 says, hey, legend, can I put gold and silver into my LLC that I created through DAG? Can I add that to my capital contributions? Or do I need my digital assets separate from that? You could probably add it. It's a capital asset, but we actually, I'll mention this on here. We just started today with Laughlin offering this. Most of the time you would see your home, vacation homes, vehicles, family heirlooms, gold and silver, other things that you want to pass down to your children that are more of a capital preservation, or you're going to use, toys, side-by-sides, boats, airplanes, that type of stuff. You would hold those, unless it's a corporate jet, you would hold it in a living trust. And now we have the capability to set up living trusts for you guys in any state that you reside in through our paralegal firm that we partner with at Laughlin. So if that's something you guys are interested in, I think it's $400 for a living trust. Super cheap. Just simple. It's a simple living trust. That's where I would put my gold and silver personally. Maybe I have or haven't. Versus my LLC with my digital assets or my asset protection trust. So up to you. You definitely could, but I think a living trust would probably be more appropriate for those assets. Again, you want access to them. They're probably going to be in your house. They're not held with a counterparty. Maybe you got a bunch of gold and it's held at a vault somewhere, but most people are holding, precious metals at their residence or in a PO box or something like that. And that's why you would want them in a living trust. Rot Corp says, got a men's physique debut this Saturday. Awesome, dude. Will be 1,484 days post chemo. Congratulations, man. That's awesome. Not planning on winning, but still planning to do the best I can. Wish me luck. Best of luck, dude. That's fantastic. So for those that don't know, I was a competitive bodybuilder for about a decade. I did 14 shows over 10 years. Won multiple overalls, won multiple shows here in Texas. Competed on the national level 3 times, once at USA's and twice at nationals in Miami before it moved here to Dallas the last couple years. I might get back into it, but if you've never competed and dieted for a bodybuilding show, I would highly recommend it. You will be hangry. You will hate everybody. Your life will suck for the 90 or 120 days or 160 days that you diet for. But the amount of discipline and grit and self-love that you will create from that is unrivaled by anything else in my mind. If you can intentionally make yourself suffer and put yourself through the discipline, the self-respect that you gain on that, second to none. So congratulations to you for doing that and putting yourself through it. It's not fun. You look awesome. You feel horrible. when you can see veins on your butt cheeks, you don't feel great, and you look crazy walking around in public. People stop and look at you like you're an alien. But definitely, it's a feeling that's second to none. Be careful on the post-show rebound. Don't go eat a bunch of sodium, especially if you use a diuretic the day of show. If you use Diazide, make sure you're watching your sodium intake. If you're water loading and playing with all that the week of, this would be peak week for you, which I'm sure you're probably doing that stuff with your coach. Hopefully you have a coach. Be careful. Lasix have killed people. Momo Benaziza died because he had locked jaw and locked up, and they gave him potassium and stopped his heart. He was the only guy to beat Dorian Yates at the Night of Champions. For those that don't know, I'm kind of a geek on the lineage of bodybuilding. So anyway, yeah, awesome dude. Super excited to see that, and best of luck to you this weekend. We got Gamer Gex. They say, hey, Jake, good evening. Is XRP going to dip once the aliens they detected recently turn out to be hostile? There's all kinds of crazy stuff that's probably going to happen, man. I guarantee you this. When XRP does go vertical, it's going to be in a moment of chaos. When nobody is paying attention, everybody's attention's on other stuff. Stuff's going to be wild. And in the darkness, while nobody's paying attention, there's going to be a huge green candle on the backside of that saves the day. So, you know, if it's aliens, if it's the reverse carry trade, if it's oil, if it's going to be a bunch of things all at once. If it's, you know, Epstein list, it'll be a bunch of stuff. We got K87 says, hey, Jake, thank you for the super chat. They say all the hype around XRP to reach $1,000 by 2030 circulating online. Your thoughts? I think it'll happen sooner. It's not what you thought I'd say, but I think it'll happen sooner. Literally had bets on it. Maris says, hey, legend, Japan is talking interest rates today. What does that mean? If they raise, and they said that they would, we could start to see things snowball and unwind here, which would be great for XRP. We got, I'm going to butcher the name, something niche. Appreciate the super chat. Do you think both Flare and XDC can hit $5 in the next 2 to 5 years or sooner, or is that realistic? Yeah, I think that's pretty realistic for both those. Potential, we got Bob Seeger. Nice name, man. Potential PT for XDC and ZBEC by end of year. I'm assuming price target is your PT. I don't know, $1 on either one. Sure. We got Para Commando. They say, hey, Jake, 3 a.m. in the UK. Dude, why are you still awake? You can watch this tomorrow. Thank you for the super chat, though. When you go live, I don't always get to see your channel. Can I ask, is it possible to invest with you 100K SRP from UK? If so, how? I would love to tell you yes, brother. Unfortunately, I don't think so. So even if that was pounds, the conversion rate, you know, the pound is stronger than the dollar, which is great, but I don't know what SRPs are. I'm not familiar with that term. But 100K, our minimum would be about 300 and what's XRP at right now? 313. We would need about $320,000 US dollars of value to buy enough XRP at this point to work with us directly. So if that's that much, then yes. If it's not that much, then unfortunately no. But as the price appreciates on XRP, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of people that qualify. Justin, what's up, man? He says, Jake, my man. What's up, dude? I was on a cruise last week, ready for 3 to 4 digits of XRP so I can have my own yacht. Love that. You dream big. People need to dream bigger. Plan to charter out for cash flows. Wake up, Uncle Danny. Thanks for all that you do. Plan a meeting in Atlanta. Yeah, we need to get out there to Georgia. We got some good Georgia boys that we know, good friends there, and we'll have to make it out that way. Wake up, Uncle Danny. We got Travis. He says, what's the appeal being drug out? With the appeal being drug out, do you think that means a bit sus? Do you think it seems a bit sus, like the catalyst to kick off accumulation? Also, what's your percentage of price appreciation $10 plus in August to after August? We got to get a move on here if we're going to be at the prices that I think we're going to be at the end of the year. Unless it's just a straight line to there. Which, you know, it could happen. You need a supply shock. Again, if there's, you know, crazier things that happen. I do think there is going to be a wild, crazy candle at the upside. When it does, I do think XRP is going to run to like $50 in 24 hours. So, you know, maybe that's in August. That'd be great if it was. I think it could be. And again, if you're in the growth fund, you're going to be making a lot of money. You're going to be compounding the heck out of XRP if you're in the growth fund when XRP is running to $50. So, if you're accredited and you want to work with digital wealth partners and you want to make a fat return on your XRP and you think that might happen, don't hesitate. Reach out. digitalwealthpartners.net. There's nothing else. I guarantee there's nothing else on the market like what we've put together to be able to compound your XRP. Doesn't exist. That's an actual real thing. There's other things like Lunacy protocol that rug you. We're an SEC registered RIA. We're regulated by FINRA. There's audits. Like, we're going to jail if we have a problem. Just so you guys know. I don't want to go to jail. I'm too pretty to go to jail. I'm big. I could hold my own, but it's not going to be a fun time for me. So I don't want to go to jail. Big fan. Money matters. Says, I own 50K XRP, no debt, high income, high risk tolerance. What's your advice on how to ride this out for a big win? Hodl, my man. If you don't need the income, if you don't need the XRP to cash out right now, this is how I operate. I keep my bank accounts fairly lean, pay bills on time, but outside of that, like anything extra, is going to XRP. And again, this is just my strategy. I'm not providing.
No tea, but I got your waffle.
Oh, thanks, babe. I'll be in there in a little bit to eat my waffle. Or your waffle.
Hey.
We got, if you got a high risk tolerance, I would just hang out. Now, if you are accredited, which, it sounds like you might be with your high income, to be accredited, just so people are aware, $200,000 if you're single, $300,000 if you're married here in the US, or at least $1 million net worth outside of the equity in your home. Can't count your primary residence in your net worth. If you meet those, certifications or qualifications, then you can absolutely participate in the funds with us. And again, they're not high risk, but they're going to compound your XRP and produce cash flows for you that you could double down or live your lifestyle with. Now, let's just say, again, I'm just going to talk a little bit open with you guys. This is not financial advice. If I had super high risk tolerance and high conviction on XRP, I might borrow against the XRP and either buy more XRP or invest it in XXRP, the leveraged ETF, which I talked about a little bit earlier. You got to have a really high risk tolerance for that. And you have to have a lot of conviction, because that could go really, really bad. That could go bad, really, really bad, if the price were to go down versus up. So again, not suggesting at all that you do that. I'm just, you mentioned high risk tolerance and no debt and high income to be able to roll the dice on something. Again, not telling you to do anything. We got Matrix exited. They say, love your scams bet. Let's go, Jake. Kira. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. I just want people to be made whole. Scams is taking XRP from a bunch of people. Even if I lose the bet, I'm okay with it. I just want those people to get their XRP back. Because not everybody has a bunch of XRP to be betting or losing to some guy on the internet. So Wayne, what's up, Wayne? He said, thank you for the super chat, man. You always do super chats. Thank you so much for the support on the channel, and everybody that does the super chats on a consistent basis and asking questions. Again, none of this is possible without you guys. So just want to say I'm grateful and feel really blessed to have you guys here. I want to thank you for the continued support and, doing the super chats. He says, what's the best way to set up multiple wallets for XRP Ledger without buying 10 decent wallets, software wallets? I would only be putting the one XRP in each account as required to open it. Probably the easiest way to consolidate all those would be to use Xaman. So XAMAN, and you can open up multiple accounts and multiple wallets in that app, which all have their own keys. I also like the way that they've done that, where it's a toggle for the 6 digits on 8 rows of numbers that you have to put in for your seed phrases on each wallet. So you can't have keystroke software on there. We'd say it's pretty sharp. He's done a good job with that. The only thing I don't like about Xaman currently is they're charging me freaking fees for large payments. When did that start happening? taking like 40 and 50 XRP from me every time I send a large payment. What the hell? Excuse my French. So that's starting to make me a little bit upset. But outside of that, everything else about that application is great. We got Ajax, that's the soap. He says, what do you think about self 401k brokerage accounts into XXRP? Yeah, that's a good play in my mind. James, appreciate you on the super chat. I don't see a question here, which I probably missed below, but I want to give you a shout out and thank you for the super chat. We got Travis. He says, hello again, sir. Do you think the government wants XRP to be a high price before they allow more of the non-crypto retail in on the ETFs? I do. I think that makes sense. It's Teddy B. What's up, Teddy? He says, why don't financial institutions begin heavy XRP adoption before ETF availability? Why allow themselves to be treated as an exit liquidity for thousands of people once XRP appreciates? They don't care about you, Teddy. They'll be happy to buy your XRP at $100, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 because it's going to go higher. Why did they buy Bitcoin late? Because it's going to go higher. They don't care. They've got the money. They also don't care if a couple, 1,000 people get rich. There might be 10,000 people or 50,000 people on the planet that have enough XRP on the other side of price appreciation that hang on to it, that actually do well. It's abysmal. There's not that many of us. If you're here, if you're watching this, you are a lucky son of a gun. You have found something before everybody else, and you've positioned yourself well, and you've figured it out before the herd shows up, before they've implemented it. There's almost never has there ever been a time where retail could front run the institutions, and this is one of those times. And they don't care because retail might hold 2 billion XRP total, maybe, probably not even that much. We currently manage over 200 million XRP. So in my mind, I think, 80 or 90% of our investors are domestic here in the US. So let's say, most of the XRP investors are here domestic in the US. We probably have a fifth of the US investors that we currently help manage their XRP for. And that's probably a little aggressive. I think it's realistic though. So, the United States would probably be the largest domicile for XRP for retail. So let's say, it's 1 billion XRP here in the US across investors. And then globally, there's probably another 60 or 80% versus totally across the globe for the rest of the world for what's here in the US. So we'll call it, 1.6, 1.8, maybe 2 billion total XRP held by retail globally. It's not that much. It's 2% of the supply. Not worried about us. And institutions are here. The price action you're seeing is institutions purchasing XRP using TWAP and VWAP. There's no other way that the price is here. Retail is not doing this and then holding the price here. No way. This is institutional buying that's gobbling up the amount of XRP and keeping the volume at the rate that it is to be able to hold price above $3. It's not retail. So the institutions are absolutely buying here. They're just doing it in a slow, methodical way so that they don't cause a bunch of volatility in the market through time-weighted volume average or time-weighted average and volume-weighted average, TWAP and VWAP, if you want to go look them up. My brother, Zoloff Zebra, says, just got a few shares of XRP volatility. Could you explain volatilities a bit? I didn't know that there was an index for XRP. I'll have to go look that up. I don't know about it. I wish I knew more. Ajax says, what? Oh, we already went over this one. And Wayne, it always kicks me back up in the chat here a little bit. We're going to go back the other way. Like I told you guys, don't be this person's posting super chats after I said not to. Winston. Winston. Winter Storm. So I'm going to go up from here. So there was one more person that posted below. I'm cutting off super chats. Don't do it. if you do it, you can, like, but you know, just know that I'm probably not going to read it and go post it in Mastermind, or reach out and we'll do it on the next one. This person says, I'm pretty much all in on XRP and HBAR based on Hedera's current partnership with Google and the activities of the institutions on their system, and of course, Ripple's massive decade advantage on everyone. I think that you are super well positioned, sir. We got 7 Denny 123 says SEC has already approved XRP through Bitwise, multiple crypto, which they paused. Do you think institutions need permission DEX and delegation to get XRP over $100? I don't. I think that permissioned ecosystems in R3 could settle through XRP and drive the price significantly higher. And I think the ETFs launching with the case settlement and other catalysts could definitely push the price to 3 digits with no problem. Jake from Duke says, what are your thoughts on Canary Network potentially becoming more relevant in blockchain innovation like Songbird for Flare? So Komatsu was the test network for Polkadot. And if you look at the price on that network, it's wild. Like both of those have seen some pretty significant adoption. So once we see Flare get some traction and they continue to develop things and roll that out on the Canary network and use that token, I do think that you could see some pretty significant price appreciation with both of those. Just transparently, I sold all of that. I sold my Flare at 29 cents on the way down after the Flare drop years ago, back in 22. And I sold off all my Canary tokens early on too for more XRP. So it was when it was lower prices than it is today, and both of those tokens were higher prices than they are today. So right now it looks like I made a good trade. But on the other side of institutional adoption and some other things, it might not be that way. The Winter Storm, excuse me, says Fidelity is using HBAR's technology. Also, BlackRock. Is this true? I can't say much on that. Omar, I did join the Mastermind. Living Legacy is a G. Yeah, he is. Mike's pretty cool. My question is, how would you evaluate derivatives on the XRPL versus how do you think they will evaluate them on the XRPL? How would you evaluate derivatives on the XRPL versus how do you think they will evaluate them on the XRPL? It's the same wording twice. Or again, I'm tired and I can't read, Omar. I think you're asking like what their value is now versus what they would be on the XRPL. I think it's going to be similar. And the reason for that is right now, I think that they're actually going to regulate derivatives and they're going to remove the ability to rehypothecate, tier 1 collateral and loan it out as many times as they are. But at the same time, you'll see an expansion in derivatives because there is regulation and clear rules of the road and more tier 1 collateral for them to use, including XRP and gold. So along with other sovereign treasuries. So I think that it'll kind of wash itself out around 2 quadrillion or 3 quadrillion in value, kind of what it is today. But I think a lot of the not so good stuff will go away. And because there's more volume and traceability and auditability and risk mitigation and ability to see risk, you'll actually get a further adoption of derivatives that would probably push it back to the same place that it is. So I think it'll wash out. Going on up here. You guys did good. You guys did good. After I said no more super chats, y'all cut them off. So I appreciate that. I think we're actually going to make it on time tonight. We got David. What's up, man? He says, does the minimum 500K have to be all crypto or can it be a mix? About 27K XRP and on the way and OTW to Bitcoin. Other assets in trust qual for 500K. Probably cut you off on how many characters you could have. We don't deal with traditional assets currently. We're working on that. Hopefully in the next 30 days, we'll have accounts where people can do that, but we don't currently have that. So unfortunately, it would have to be all crypto. And I want to say thank you for the super chat. We do look forward to working with you because it sounds like you're probably going to be one of the clients in the near future when we do offer traditional stuff. We got Doc77. He says, hey, Jake, what banks would you recommend obtaining my checking account with for my LLC, or where should I look for Mastermind service info? I think we have a link, but you can email us at info@digitalfamilyoffice.io, and we'll get you the link for Mercury to set up account there. We got CK13. Hey, ma'am, or sir. I think it's ma'am. Please explain XRP ETFs and price appreciation. So right now we already have some XRP ETFs, but they're futures ETFs. And in futures ETFs, they don't have to hold the underlying asset. So they don't actually have to buy XRP. They're buying futures. Now, they could take possession, on the other side of the futures contract. Most of the time, they just do rolling futures. So they don't ever have possession of the XRP. So there's not any constraint on supply and demand dynamics. But if you have a spot ETF, very similar to the Bitcoin ETF, they started buying up a bunch of Bitcoin as people bought the spot ETF. And so therefore, they're taking all that Bitcoin off the market. You would have the same thing happen for XRP when spot ETFs are launched. And depending on the amount of volume that they saw in a very short period of time, if you had the Ripple case settle and maybe you have announcements from Bank of America and Amazon and Apple and Google and all these people that are issuing their stablecoin and using XRP that are all rolled out at the same time somehow, probably going to be a lot of FOMO from retail into those ETFs and a lot of volume on it all at one time. And so with that, you would get a supply shock. There wouldn't be enough XRP on the market to be able to, provide enough for those ETFs. And because of that, you would need higher prices where retail would then liquidate a portion of their portfolio and sell to the institutions to be able to back these spot ETFs. And so that's how you would drive price higher and higher very quickly when there wasn't any available on the market and you had to push it to $5, $10, $15, $20, $25, $30, $35, $40, $50 for retail to sell their positions to the institutions. So that's how that would work. Hopefully that provides you some value. I haven't talked much about this, but I do want to throw it in here because this is going away soon too. If you do want to set up an LLC to be able to mitigate taxes and protect your digital assets, we've got a full end-to-end program, annual renewal, and a corporate veil program to make sure that you have full protection against creditors on your assets. So it acts pretty similar to a trust. You don't get the probate protection with the LLC, but you do get a lot of creditor protection. You have charging order protection there in Wyoming, and we make sure that everything's structured the right way for that. So if that sounds cool to you, if you want anonymity, if you want tax benefits, if you want to protect your digital assets and make sure that you have control of them over the long term, and all the benefits that come along with being a business owner, then you can set that up with us. And it doesn't have to be through us. You can do it through LegalZoom. I talk about, there's multiple videos on how to set it up, do a single member LLC. Make sure you have the operating agreement with all the provisions in it. That's going to be the most costly part if you do it without us. An attorney to draft that's going to be somewhere between, on the low end, $1,500, on the high end, $2,500. So we just charge $2,000 for everything. If you use this code that's on the screen right here, so 50 off DAG LLC, all capitalized. That's 50OFF DAG LLC. Get you everything all in, end to end. EIN, articles of organization, certificate of good standing, the financial or the report for your LLC, step-by-step process on how to move your assets into the LLC without tax implications, the operating agreement, the template that has all the provisions and everything that you need to operate correctly. It's filed correctly so you mitigate taxes. We can do family limited partnerships or qualified joint ventures as long as you let us know that it is that when you file it. Because some people want to involve their spouse. So make sure that your state, allows for qualified joint ventures if you're going to do it that way. If your state doesn't have that exemption, you can always make your spouse a managing member of your LLC. The best time to do that is when your assets are worth somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 a piece. Is when we see most people start to set up their LLCs. So again, the code, if you want to set that up, is 50 off 50OFF DAG LLC. All capitalized. You can go to Digital Family Office and the services page there to get that done. Yeah, you guys did great on the super chats. I'm proud of y'all. And I might be able to get to all of them. Let's see here. We got Lone Wolf. Say looks like more confirmation for XRP DTC World Bank. That's a massive deal. Carbon One, very thankful for the seat at the table, bro. Thanks. Awesome, man. Glad to have you there in the mastermind. And again, for anybody that's still watching, tomorrow's the last day. The only time you're ever going to be able to get into the mastermind for free. One more day this month, and then we're going to raise the price. So if you want to do that, if you want to check it out, if you're on the fence, this is the time to do it. And just use the code BEYONDBROKE, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO gets you a free month there in the group. Got a lot of cool people. The culture's fantastic. There's over 5,000 people there in the community that have an alignment in digital assets and want to help each other grow on the other side of price appreciation. And we're going to lock it down completely on the other side of price appreciation. Once XRP is over $10, we're locking it down for 10 days. And at that point, it'll be very scrutinized on who gets in. We got Uncle Tickles, the dandy man. Oh, sorry, the candy van. That is creepy. It's a really creepy name. I think price will come after the ETF announcement, but before they go live. No way they let ETF investors ride all the way up and cause FOMO. You might be surprised, Uncle Tickles. A really weird name, man. But yeah, I'm with you. I think people will catch a piece of it, but I don't think they're going to get the whole thing like you're talking about. Now, if you're an XXRP, you're going to get the whole ride. Jim Trim says, any timeline on when commercial coal bank accounts setup will be included into the LLC setup? Next 20 days, probably less. We're working with the Counterparty right now. So again, that'll be another, if you set up an LLC with us, you'll get a bank account. We will work with you to set that up. We'll send you a link, make it super simple and easy to get it done there with Mercury and expedite that setup for you. Because we've had a lot of people that have had a lot of frictions and problems setting up bank accounts. We got Tino. They say, hey, Jake, Mastermind member. Awesome, dude. Glad to have you there in the community. You mentioned paying myself or possibly my partner in an annual salary via the LLC. Can you expand more on how that works? Yeah, so in order to be able to file an S-Corp exemption to have pass-through taxation on the LLC, the IRS requires that you pay yourself a reasonable salary. So in the eyes of the IRS, as a manager of a corporation, you know, it's normally dependent on the income of the corporation, but you can get away with paying yourself somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 a year. And you're still going to owe the W-2 taxes on that. So Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which is about another 13.5% on taxes. Anything above that, you can pay yourself in monthly or quarterly distributions out of the business, which don't have that W-2 tax on top of them. So that's, you know, obviously there's got to be enough money coming in for you to be able to do that. But that would be the way that you would, you know, set that up. And obviously you could pay yourself a higher salary than that if you wanted to, but again, you're going to owe those W-2 taxes. That's an additional 13.5%. So just be aware of that. We got Happy Days, cool name. How will you pay the yield yearly, monthly, weekly, daily? I would love it if it was more frequent. We're currently quarterly. When we set the CD up with our counterparty in the near future, that's probably also going to be quarterly or biannual on the shortest cadence. We're going to figure something out for monthly. Believe me, like we're going to have to. I want it to be as close to DeFi as we possibly can. The problems and frictions that you run into with traditional stuff, to do it on a faster cadence than that, just become very cumbersome. And that's why smart contracts are so fantastic, because they automate everything. They automate the accounting, like all of it. So, you know, I would love to pay people up to the minute. And as things progress and we do implement smart contracts a year from now, I would like to be daily a year from now. That is my goal. Is that going to happen? Maybe. If we really push, I think we can. But it's also on our partners. Anchorage is slow to move on a lot of this stuff. They are a regulated bank. Ripple is going to be a regulated bank. I think if Ripple can push the envelope on some of this stuff and actually implement, you know, some of these smart contracts on the EVM side chain, Zbeck and other partners, you know, for streaming payments and doing different applications like that, I think we can work it in, and we could probably end up, you know, coding our own smart contracts. I just want to make sure it's safe, right? The more frictions that exist in the system, the less likely something is to get lost. We had a guy just recently, he got his SIM swap on his phone, and they stole all of his assets from Caleb and Brown and his hot wallet. He was in the hospital, foggy because of some anesthesia and some other stuff. They called Caleb and Brown and stole his assets off Caleb and Brown with a SIM swap, and they did the hot wallet too. It was on his phone. So, heart goes out to him. Not a small amount of XRP that he lost. And I'm really hopeful that Caleb and Brown really does have crime insurance. Be about $500,000 that they owe this gentleman if they really do have crime insurance. We'll see if they pay up or not. Again, that goes back to the institutional custody side of things. If you really are institutional, then you're going to have this and you're really going to pay out on this policy. But I don't know if they are or not. And it's going to tell me a lot about their services if they don't. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. Chad, what's up, man? You guys don't know Chad, but I've known Chad a long time. He was there when I proposed to my wife. He's good people. He said, my brother, don't tell people how much you have, Chad. I want to retire with $50K a month. How long do you think it'll be till XRP can make that happen? Chad, get your name off your YouTube channel right now. Change it. And don't tell people how much XRP you got. Shouldn't have to tell you that. Not too far in the future, man. The appreciation's coming. I mean, you've already seen it. I gave you a wedding gift of, I think it was like 2,000 XRP that I gave you and your wife at your wedding. And obviously you bought a little more since then, which kudos to you. But yeah, we will definitely have solutions, especially as XRP goes up in value, where you can just park it and earn, great cash flow off of that, and then live your life, enjoy it, travel, spend time with kiddos, have more kiddos. Anyway, good to see you, man. Appreciate you hopping on here in the super chat, and we need to catch up soon. Rob, he says, hey Jake, have you seen this? From CNN today, the Trump administration is targeting Iran's oil sales by sanctioning a vast Iranian shipping empire, ramping up pressure on Iran. Maybe the U.S. is who shuts down the Strait of Gibraltar. I wonder what would happen if they did that. Chaos would ensue, and we would be rich. I probably need to read this top down. We got Crypto Keeper, 3 super chats. Thank you so much. They say, Joel, great meeting you in Vegas. Ripple has applied for their banking license, but 42 banks already trying to hold up the process. It's like the banks want to remain in control, and they would allow many XRP holders to get wealthy. Oh, this is Gavin, separate here. So we're gonna go back to Crypto Keeper. Yeah. I'm with you, dude. And it's not that many. Like, again, they don't care about 50,000 people. Most, and this is going to sound mean, and I don't mean it that way, just so you guys know. Unfortunately, most people that do have large amounts of XRP are going to end up like lottery winners. It's an inevitability. I can come on here every single night if I wanted to and talk about how to, wealth management and wealth preservation and family office and all the things we do with our clients. But inevitably, there are going to be at least 50% of those people, 25,000 people that come into 20, 30, 50 million dollars, $100 million that will be broke in 3 years. They will buy homes, they will buy cars, they will buy liabilities that burn through that cash. They will go on extravagant trips, they'll buy yachts. They won't do it inside of an LLC to mitigate taxes. They don't know how to structure their estate. They won't put together a family board and financial committee. They won't continue to double down on assets and mitigate risk and diversify their portfolio. They will sell it and have large tax implications instead of borrowing against it and using that liquidity to buy assets that cash flow and offset taxes. They're not going to do it the right way. And I'm hopeful that even if you guys don't work with us, right? Like I try to make it simple. We do a lot of cool stuff at Digital Ascension Group. Even if you don't work with us, the main takeaway, if you can take something away this evening, is just to start educating yourself on how to protect your wealth over the long term, insurance, trusts, structures, the right professionals, curating that group around yourself to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. That is the gift and the contribution that I would like to make to the XRP family. Not even the business and what we're doing, just that people start thinking about that now and realizing that that's a real thing and trying to mitigate that risk for them and their family so that they do have this wealth over the long term and they don't burn through it. I can say this, most people that I meet with are not gluttonous, they're not egotistical, and they probably don't want moon boy Lambos and stuff. But I think it's pretty easy to mess it up. And that's why family offices pay 1% to 2% at $100 million a year so that they have staff that handles all this stuff for them. Because a 5% mistake when you have $100 million is $5 million. And it only takes a couple of those before you don't have any money anymore. So again, not to fearmonger, I want to empower people, but I want people to start taking these steps now and making sure they're, surrounding themselves with the right people. And people are going to get wealthy and their banking charter is going to get approved, whether these other banks like it or not. They bought a prime broker. They have a lot of leverage with that. Gavin says, hey, Jake, we've gone from T3 to T2 to T1. When we go to zero settlement, also, what's your thought on 20% yield article on CoinDesk about the more markets DeFi through smart contracts while retaining self-custody? I haven't seen that, but I'm going to have to go check that out. We got more markets. What was the publication? CoinDesk. See, this is the cool part for me. I get to learn from you guys because I don't get to see everything. We're head down, we're working in the business all day, every day. And so sometimes I miss stuff, but you guys have great questions and you bring stuff up and I appreciate you, Gavin. I will go check that out. We got Stone and Land. I like the name. That's cool. They say, thanks for sharing the alternative ideas, insights, and positive catalysts. Very valuable to the game plan. Thank you, man. I appreciate you being here and for the super chat. I did not read this super chat, so I'm going to get to here right at the end. We got Cheyenne Dixon from last week. I hope you're still watching, man. I'm sorry I missed you. She says, hey, Jake, once XRP goes into price appreciation and I can become a client of yours, how could I take out a loan against my XRP shares? They're tokens, but I like it. Would I be subject to monthly payment or would I be handling it on the back end? So, great question. Currently, we do have interest-only payments monthly with our partners that provide liquidity. So if you borrow against your XRP, it's monthly interest payments with a balloon payment at the end. But if the XRP appreciates, you can just refinance your loan at the end. So as long as you're clipping, at least 1% a month and you're able to cover that, you're normally pretty good. It's about 15% is what they charge on the notes right now. In the near future, if certain partnerships play out for us, I'm hoping that we'll be a lot closer to 7% loans on your XRP. And maybe there's a way where your assets can stay right there in your account. The counterparty can use the reflection of those assets to trade reverse repo or something riskless, and then they issue a line of credit against your XRP with an additional 200 basis points or 2%. So now maybe you're borrowing against your XRP for like 2% or 3% on a line of credit. That would be awesome. So this doesn't exist today. We're working on those things. Huge. So it's coming. But we do have ways to be able to borrow against it. Right now, it is just monthly interest payments. So again, if you're interested in that, Digital Wealth Partners or over there in the Mastermind, we can absolutely help you out with that. And I think that's going to be it. We've come to the end of it here tonight. Just want to say thank you guys for taking the time out of your evening to hang out with me and ask great questions here on the live. We've got so many questions over here on YouTube and X that I did not get to TikTok, and I appreciate you guys for hanging out and watching, even though I'm not answering these questions over here. If you do, if we had, there was a time when there was not as many super chats over here on TikTok, over here on YouTube that I could get to more on TikTok. Best book to learn about wealth management. I've got one here for you guys. So for people that are still hanging out, Borrowed from Your Grandchildren is great. This teaches you about the evolution of 100-year family enterprises and how to manage it. It's more of a family office book, But I think it was really valuable for me. So consider that one. And then Think and Grow Rich. I think that is probably, one of my favorites as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Again, tomorrow is the last day for the Mastermind that it will ever be free. So if you want to go check it out, if you want to try out the Mastermind for free, this is your last shot. Go to beyondbroke.com and use the code beyondbroke, all capitalized, #1, and then MO, gets you a free month there in the group. In addition to that, if you need your LLC, you want to make sure that you're set up previous to price appreciation for the most success that you can have to be able to mitigate taxes and protect your assets. You can work with us. You can do it on your own. If you want to work with us, you go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50OFF, 50OFFDAGLLC. That's 50OFF DAGLLC, all capitalized. Get you everything all in, end to end for your LLC for $2,000 and corporate veil. And you get your own person that's going to call you and make sure you keep up all your documents. You can't get it anywhere else, I promise you. And then into the last piece, if you do have enough to work with this, you got something set up, you can reach out to Digital Wealth Partners. We would love to work with you for institutional custody, the ability to borrow against your XRP, advisory, financial planning, and the ability to earn returns, and in the near future, yield on your XRP. So with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, a wonderful night. We will see you on the next one.